everybody. My name is Ira Cohen, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. It's actually not a panel. It's just a discussion among friends. If you see, we've moved the chairs around, so it'll be a little bit more intimate circle. The topic for today is RCS messaging, something that we've all been talking about for a really long time. At some point, you feel like it's blah, 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 because we're all just talking and talking and talking, and we don't really see it happening, much like your horror story of IoT. That was the previous panel, which he has nightmares from that. So today we'll talk about some of the developments and opportunities in RCS. We had a pre-briefing, which you didn't show up to. So Igor and I basically planned out your demise. So I'll give Nick the first chance. And what I'd like you to do is to introduce yourself, Nick, where you're from, what you do. Not yet. And then you need to ask a question. If you had to choose an animal that represents RCS, what animal would you choose and why?
Thanks, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Great to be here. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Lane. I'm Chief Insight Analyst and founder at Mobile Squared. We specialize in delivering business messaging data, analysis and forecasts across the messaging industry, also CPaaS. One animal or two animals? Can I do? Well, the one that springs to mind is a sloth, if I'm honest.
Is this being recorded?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what worries me.
Nick Lane said that RCS resembles a sloth. Go ahead.
But it could be. It could be.
Why does it resemble a sloth? I'm not going to let you let you off
It
the easy.
resembles a sloth because it moves so slowly. We've been talking about this for nearly 10 years, and it should be so far ahead. It should be blowing people's minds about what it can deliver to brands and enterprises. But we're not. We're still talking about what is typically something that's still in an experimental phase, yet to really go commercial. So I think from that perspective, a sloth is probably accurate, but its potential is probably something more like a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Ooh. That's the quote that he wants. Okay, my good friend Igor here. So Igor, please introduce yourself, and I'm going to give you a little bit different. If you had to choose a rock band, which rock band would represent RCS? No, that would be too easy. You'd have to answer prepared.
Okay, my name is Igor Skutsinya. I'm an RCS team leader in Lang Telecom and also a senior business development manager. I am kind of administering the process of getting RCS into our product mix and service mix. And I'm developing our network and our technology to make sure that RCS is alive and well, at least with Lang Telecom. About the rock.
Ramstein. You're in Germany.
English is not my first language, which is why I know animals way better than the kinds of rocks. But I would assume that it's kind of a volcano lava underneath the earth. I mean, it's getting there eventually, and it's super potential, and there's a lot of things that it can bring around.
And it's really hot.
It's really hot, yeah. But it's still like kind of sort of underground, and it's crawling up at a really slow pace.
Okay, so that was a great opening. So right away, within the first 2 minutes, we've already highlighted that it's a sloth or it's a volcano, and which is probably a lot of the confusion that people have about RCS in the world because we're coming from different places. But I think what's highlighted already, and I agree with Nick, we've been talking about this for a really, really long time. We've been talking about, first it was the potential of RCS and how we should build it. I remember I was invited by the GSMA because I was so passionate about the billing model to try and convince the network operators that they shouldn't make the billing model for RCS at all similar to SMS. And obviously we failed because that's more or less what they went ahead and did. And basically WhatsApp has taken over that conversation now about we charge by conversations rather than by that usage. So we've all been involved in the discussion, and it just seems not to have gone anywhere. So what do you attribute to the fact that it's been so slow, that's taking so much time? That was your point. That was the sloth analogy.
Well, there's a lot of chefs. Too many chefs ruin the broth. So I think that's part of the problem. There's a lot of people previously trying to put their penny's worth of thoughts into the mix and trying to keep 800 mobile operators or however many there are happy. you can't do it. Whereas WhatsApp, they've got a small team, or smallish team in comparison to developers. They can decide one thing, what they're going to do, they go off and do it. They develop it and then it becomes a product. So it's much easier. So, you know, I think that's part of the problem. Then obviously 2 years ago, you had the Google announcement, which fundamentally changed everything.
Tell everybody, they may not know what it is. Tell about the Google announcement.
I'll let you say it.
Okay. Google basically said, we're sick and tired of waiting for the network operators to get their act together. And so we're closing down all your RCS activity. We're setting up a certain amount of countries in the world, one operator per country. And everyone else, you don't like it, too bad, this is how we're doing it. And they can do that because they own the technology, right? So they have a right to do that. What that did is that everybody who was scrambling to get RCS ready basically had to say, okay, I can only work with one operator in one country, or however it was. And basically it was no longer an open ecosystem. It was basically a closed ecosystem. Everybody had to work by Google's rules. Is that fair? Was that a fair clarification of the statement?
Mostly, yeah,
Okay, thanks.
I agree with that.
You're the data guy, so you know better than me.
Yeah, but we're looking at it from a data perspective.
How many operators are currently RCS compliant? I know the answer, maybe you don't.
Well, you told me yesterday, so it's 110.
Okay.
But then in terms of how many are monetizing it, hardly any. You know, if you think you've got about 40, 45 operators that have rolled out their RBM, so their map platform. But, you know, right now of those operators, most of those countries are either zero spend or it's experimental spend with brands. You know, same with, if you look at Germany, Germany launched their map. All three major operators launched 3 years ago. It's still kind of an experimental phase today. So that's kind of where we are with RCS. We're kind of getting there, but it needs some kind of major catalyst to get it kind of over the line and turn it into a big commercial opportunity. If you look at Japan, you know, that was the kind of flagship country for the GSMA going back 5 years when they all launched. And now it's hardly used.
Yeah, but Japan was always ahead of the world in a lot of things. If you guys remember the NTT Docomo days, they were the first ones to have ability to send data over the cellular channel. I worked for Nokia at the time, and we were trying to figure out, if we put cameras into phones, what are people going to do with their pictures? Okay, the Japanese already had cameras in their phones, and they didn't have a problem because they could send pictures over the cellular network. GSMA network didn't have it. So Japan has always been ahead of us, you know, on a bunch of these things. You're a service provider. How many countries are you currently selling RCS into? Whatever.
Well,
I'm a service provider too, and I can answer the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have margin in terms of RCS, and definitely there were some, apart from technological advancement, if you would like to refer it as a commercial kind of decline when you go back to the SMS model, this is one thing, but business-wise, it's a lot easier thing to sell. If I mean, we're not going to be becoming a marketing agency over time, overnight, and we just understand that maybe we should stick to something that we have existing business relations with, existing teams, existing expertise, existing contracts, et cetera, et cetera. So that thing that you know, many people hate around about going basic RCS, I think this is a natural progression. This is a perfectly natural response into the problem that, well, I mean, the commercial model, and if you just put something that is familiar, that the marketing people know how to use, or at least they have some idea to use now, if they actually have a commercial model, if they can try it out on a smaller scale with an existing partner, it's just an easier thing. I mean, you can have the best technology in the world, just like the Japanese would have, like in the 80s. They would have the TV in their wristwatch. Well, I mean, they couldn't sell it, and this is perfectly one of the things that is kind of sort of happens with RCS. I mean, maybe our sales force is not that strong to actually sell the best thing in the world. Like the electric cars have been around for more than 100 years, but it took one guy or his team of salesmen to actually make it as a reality, make it as a product, actually sell it, maintain it, produce it at the mass production, and lobby the legislation that would favor it. It's just a little more complex than just having the better mousetrap and the world is beating the path to your door. It's a little more complex than that.
So you mentioned marketing. You obviously know that this is something that I've been talking about for a bit. What other possible verticals there are for RCS other than the marketing usage?
I think, well, the technology that we see and the demonstration is just wonderful. You can have metaverse inside of a RCS messenger. You can have streamlined video, which is, as kind of could be the way to go. Or you can integrate payments there. You can integrate location in there. Lots of things could be happening. So once you beat the path,
What's happening? What is happening?
but what is happening is we're beating the path to the actual customer, to the enterprises. We're educating the retail consumer that, hey, this RCS thing is actually existing. And then next year they will have payments. Then next year they will have location. Next year they will have metaverse, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, if I would have a magic wand that would just, make it a reality in one day, I would. But it doesn't, it's not how the RCS works, sadly. I would like in 2 months. I would like to have all the 110 operators that, well, more than that, all the operators that work with on RCS to just have this ability right away with a clear billing model, with a clear business model, and all the retail consumers are educated about what it is, and they're no longer using WhatsApp. Well, it takes hard work. It's on the other hand, though, it could be a positive thing. It's like, when in that joke when two guys are going through the forest and there's a bear in front of them, and one of them is trying to tie in his shoes to make sure they stay on the feet, and it says the other guy saying, look, I mean, you're not outrunning the bear. Why do you do that? I don't have to outrun the bear. I don't have to outrun you. And this is exactly where we are. I mean, whoever is dragging RCS forward, investing work hours, investing finance, investing time, and actually educate and do all this, as of today, thankless job would be ahead tomorrow. And we know about operators that say we're dropping this RCS ball. We know about the messaging aggregators that are saying, look, we're not doing that. The technology is not yet mature, but we understand that we're now building the RCS network. We're building RCS coverage. We're introducing today, it's going to be more RCS traffic in our network than yesterday and the day before. And we think this is perfectly the way to go.
Actually, it's a great point that maybe I wanted to also make. When we talk about RCS, we're basically talking about two different things. We're talking about RCS and RBM. RBM is the business messaging. RCS is more the basic product, which is basically the SMS replacement, okay? In many countries of the world, it's because of the way that Google has priced it, it's cheaper to send an RCS message than send an SMS message, because the SMS message is still based on network pricing. RCS is
RCS or RBM?
RCS.
I thought RCS is free.
RCS is free. It's cheaper than SMS, what I said.
Fair enough.
Thank you. So therefore, what I'm amazed at is those countries, why don't we just send OTPs on RCS, right? It's cheaper than sending an SMS. Why don't a lot of the other basic messaging uses being done? And I know that you're doing it, we're doing it, but we're not seeing a lot of it, because we saw a lot of it. Then the basic adaptation or the acceptance of RCS technology would be on more people's phones. People would be becoming more used to it. I know, Nick, you have that famous example from your survey where, people, the US them, if they get the verification codes via SMS and they say, no, they're getting rid of it. They have no idea that it's SMS because it's just something that's in their phone. Same thing with RCS, right? So why don't we see more of that? Why isn't the industry pushing that?
I think, well, from our perspective, the main reason is because the OTP delivery quality is supposed to be the best there is. You must have the instant delivery. You must have instant quality and delivering a very, very large proportion of the messages. I mean, with marketing, you kind of get away with if not all the marketing messages are being delivered, frankly. But with OTPs, you are held to the highest standard, and this is why it's kind of difficult for RCS to be used as a channel for OTPs. Although, if you are making sure that you have the SMS fallback, if you are not reaching someone with RCS and you kind of have that secondary channel with SMS, and you're delivering it, you're making sure that the brands are on board with RCS. You're making sure that the customers actually see this one-time password in the better setting with branded profile, et cetera, et cetera. This is how you educated them. This is how you get the brands on board, and they actually start doing it. And then after a while, they could be considered all the other things that they would do through the RCS channel.
Agree?
Yes.
You're the guy who follows these trends. Wouldn't this help the trend?
Yeah, it would help the trend, but it's also understanding where we are with messaging and with the evolution. So I think part of the problem has always been that we've been talking about the nirvana, the kind of the rich carousel that can deliver everything. It can deliver the functionality, the payment element, everything that you basically want from a website or an app in RCS. That's what we've been talking about. But the reality is that we're nowhere near there. So if you look at the breakdown of spend right now, 96% of spend is on SMS, so one-way communications. 4% is on rich channels. The majority pretty much is all mostly is via WhatsApp. Most of that spend is basic chat. So that's kind of where we're at. We're evolving from one-way basic messaging onto basic chat. So we've still got a number of steps to go. Even kind of you could put MMS in there as well in terms of a basic one-way message with an image. But that's it. That's where messaging is right now. So I think you've got to put it into context. That is where we want to be. That's what we're selling. But part of the problem, I think, is when you go to a brand and then say, look how amazing this is. This is what it can do. So, well, what are we doing right now? We can just send a message. It's almost changing the mindset again. I think that we've got to be quite careful how we do this when we go and speak to brands, because we've promised this kind of rich, really highly engaged channel, which it will become at some point. But right now, we're now saying, well, just use it as an SMS. But if that's the way it's going to work, then maybe that's the way it has to be, and we've positioned it wrongly, and we should have done something. If we, in hindsight, should have done something completely different. But the numbers basically state that we are only at a basic chat kind of era of the evolution.
Yeah, if I may add, well, it's very difficult to sell this wonderful, amazing thing if you have 15% delivery. It's like, it could be the best thing in the world, but if you're covering just this much and the quality isn't there yet, I mean, it's kind of a hard sell for the brands to see, because they look at SMS for a reason. They look at SMS because there's more than 90% delivery always. There's more than 90% of them being opened within the first 3 minutes. And it's wonderful statistics to have. The RCS doesn't yet have it. So obviously there are several lessons that have been learned by the SMS folks that should be considered in RCS, for example.
Every time we have to sell RCS and I have to say, well, if they can't get RCS, we have SMS fallback. I'm like, well, this is not the way to sell a product. Not the way. Well, if it doesn't work, well, this is what you can do, right? This is how it works. It's a horrible way to go and sell a product because someone's never used your product before, right? So because you're already telling him, that it's not going to work. Okay. So to your point, when we started talking about RCS within all of these industry forums, and some of you may know that I'm sometimes vocal about these things, my point is that we cannot sell it as RCS, as SMS 2.0. It has to be totally rebranded. Now, one of my claims when I went to the mobile.com is that I said to them, if you price this or if you sell this as a commodity, it'll be treated as a commodity, and you'll never be able to do value-based pricing on it. That was exactly the point. And I always use the example of toilet paper, because you go into a supermarket, all the toilet paper looks exactly alike. The one guy says, well, we have 300 sheets, we have 500 sheets. And then there was a brand in the United States that was called Charmin. And they said, oh, we're softer than everybody else. That was like the branding. We give you a different utility rather than just wiping what everybody wipes it with. So it's a horrible thing to say in a technology event, sorry, but that's the perfect example. Everybody gets the exact same usage out of it. It's the exact same as commodity. There's no possibility to give it a different price unless we sell more sheets of paper in it or we make it a softer design.
The best thing RCS could do is go to an ad agency and say, create a brand. That's what they should do.
That's right. You have my notes up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you in terms of creating the brand and just getting this a bit more vertically integrated. Because I mean, if you're selling SMS, then you're fine without a marketing agency behind your back. You're fine without like a large brand department that would do that thing for you, because you have a sender ID and you have 160 characters. There's not much you could do about it. RCS requires a lot more work, and this could be one of the reasons why it actually takes slower, because just like we kind of talked about yesterday at the previous panel, it requires a lot more investment. And when the messaging aggregators and the brands, they see, look, I mean, we can invest in SMS, the kind of thing that is growing 30% a year, or we can devote this resources and go to RCS where the success isn't certain. Well, majority of that would very logically just go for investment into SMS, because they know that this is a working business. It's a working business model with the demand, with tens of billions of dollars every year, and it's just a safer way.
So let's play the blame game. Yeah. So we have a bunch of different players in the RCS. We have mobile network operators. Are there any MNOs in the room? Great, we can throw it on them then. So then there are service providers. So I mean, we're certainly in that mix to be blamed. There's Google. They're certainly in the mix to be blamed. There's businesses who have not, the enterprises who have not adopted this. So who do you think is the place to blame on? By the way, I'll answer from my perspective, us. Service providers have not done a good job selling this. We were given a deck of cards. We did not make the best out of the hand that we were given. That's my opinion.
If I may, I think the one part of the blame is actually our business model with operators.
Sorry?
Our business model with operators, the way we work with them. The operators are the network providers. They provide us with coverage, and we do whatever. We handle the product. We deliver those SMS. We work with brands, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we're used to that role, and the network operators are used to that role because it works. They don't have to sell RCS. Neither we are, because we know that SMS is expanding at a very rapid increase. We're kind of used. We're maybe gotten a little lazy, just making sure that we do the same thing over and over and over because it works. And this
we're making money.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Come to Berlin,
Yeah.
we get fancy hotels. And
Oh yeah.
SMS is paying for it.
Yeah, and it's actually a working thing. So we perhaps the thing that was, if you just copy and paste the same approach into RCS, because it's essentially a better product with a lot more value, et cetera, it would work. Well, it
Who's to
doesn't.
blame? You avoided the question.
I think everyone's to blame. There's
No.
An individual.
Okay.
Name an individual.
Okay, me. Okay.
This is the blame game.
Yeah. Okay, I am to blame. I mean, maybe I didn't.
Service providers.
Yeah.
Agree.
You. I'm going to throw something else in there. So the GSMA came up with a theory that you needed gold markets.
Right.
So the gold market, if you're not familiar, is when all of the major operators had launched RCS. And the first country to do that was Japan. So that's why it became the flagship country. And everyone bought into that. It's like, oh yeah, great, let's get these gold markets. We bought into it with our analysis and trying to look at when we're doing our forecast, when markets would become gold and everything. And we talk about, in several years' time, they'll have this number of gold countries. But ultimately, I think that is one of the issues fundamentally that we've never recovered from, because what we're basically saying is don't touch RCS until every operator has launched it. So, in hindsight, if I was Vodafone, who obviously had their RBM platform years ahead of everyone else, I'll be majorly pissed off, because you're sitting there with a platform that you want to go and sell to brands, and yet you've got a trade body saying, wait for everyone else. And then you'll have the ubiquity that we promised with SMS. And that's kind of the message that we've always kind of portrayed as an industry to brands, is that it's going to be all about scale. Right now you've got over 3.5 billion Android devices. So in theory, if all of those become RCS, the RCS potential is actually therefore greater than WhatsApp. So that's why this will ultimately work. But it's how long is it going to be from where we are today, having been talking about it for about 10 years, to when it becomes this kind of commercial monster.
It'll happen if we don't screw it up even more.
Well, yeah, but it will happen. It's inevitable. The journey has started. It's just a case of when will it happen.
I think it's very important also to underline the weaknesses that WhatsApp has. I mean, we are, I guess, at this point at the business where we actually point at the other guy and say, look, there's
Blame game.
there are things that are wrong with this channel as well. And we're not saying, I think we're not saying it often enough how much safer the RCS is than WhatsApp. WhatsApp is a proprietary channel. with no regulatory body behind
Have
it.
you been in the United States
Yeah.
for any extent of time? Have you watched TV there?
Sometimes, yes.
There are these ads by
Yes.
Facebook
Yeah.
about WhatsApp,
Mhm.
about how they, they have, well, sending an SMS message is like going to your mailbox and saying all of your neighbors reading your mail, right? These ads run a lot.
Yes.
So
The thing is, the cases, I mean, I am in the security space as well. One of the products that we have is with fraud management. And when we talk about fraud in North America or in Europe with a major financial institutions, they say, look, the very common thing is where the fraudsters would reach out to victims, WhatsApp to WhatsApp, pose as a bank, and actually extort them or somehow just get the money out from unsuspecting, sometimes senior citizens. And it's tens of thousands of dollars in losses for one victim or tens of millions of dollars for one financial institution. And whenever those financial institutions go to WhatsApp, there is no way to appeal to them. It takes them 2 weeks to respond. And when they do, they say, there's nothing we can do about it because this is how the channel works. Well, yeah, with RCS and SMS, you have, for once in our lifetime, it's nice to have the government on your team. There is regulatory affairs, there are regulations, there are rules, there is government, and there is sometimes even the due process that you can follow with SMS or with any other telecom operator channel.
okay, so we got to the point where we're talking about the other OTTs, the ones that are theoretically competing with RCS. Maybe we should just forget about RCS altogether and just go the OTT route. And why even waste? Why be involved in all this? We talk about it. There's Google, Apple doesn't want to do RCS. It's operated. Life is easier. We'll just go with the SMS route. We'll sell WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, Kakao, Telegram, Viber, and I'm missing about 30 others. We'll sell all of those. RCS, we have rich media with other channels, right? They're right, very popular. Everybody has them on their phone. Don't need any education. Don't need to teach people. Let's just sell that. Why bother?
Ubiquity, to cliche it. If you think with SMS, you got that, you can reach everyone in the country. So, you look at the lockdowns through the pandemic, which channel did governments turn to communicate with the majority population? It was SMS. So, that's kind
So
of.
you're agreeing with me. We'll just use SMS and
No.
OTTs and not RCS. You're agreeing.
I think
Is this being recorded? First, Nick Lane said that he's a sloth, or now he's denying something that he said.
I think that the Nick's definition in this case would be the operator-based channel, not just SMS, but the RCS as well.
The native app.
The point I was going to make, if I was rudely interrupted,
We've been friends for a long time. You're used to it. Go ahead.
was that if you just look at the base of the device base globally, then SMS is pretty much unique mobile users. That's what SMS gives you. So if you want to replicate that, you basically need Android plus one, and that plus one is Apple. So our view, and we've been banging on about this for a long time, is that messaging and rich messaging will only take off when Apple flip its model and start offering outbound marketing and promos on its channel. Not to support RCS. We've never said that would happen. We don't think it would ever happen. Why would it happen? Doesn't make any sense from Apple's perspective. Obviously works from Google's perspective. But when you then, with Apple Messages for Business, stop just using it for inbound traffic, which isn't particularly popular on itself. It's probably one of the few services that Apple hasn't got right. But when that happens, you've then got that ubiquity. You've then got that reach across pretty much almost every consumer via a smartphone. And that's what's going to appeal. That will appeal to the brands. And then that's when we think that will then be when you'll see the cliched.
And then we can go to a brand and say, okay, design a campaign, design it for Android, design it for Apple.
We
will send it-
do a campaign. And
Right.
then it's be down to you guys to then say, okay, this is our rich media campaign. It will go to everyone on Apple. It will go to everyone on Android.
And it would be a lot. The two things that are going with this ubiquity is, first of all, you don't have to build your customer base like the Vibers and WhatsApp and Telegram must be. They must expand. They must spend billions of dollars to actually get to the point where they are today, to have those billions of potential customers. Well, the RCS wouldn't have to do it because this is a native app. There's basically zero marketing cost directed to exactly that. And another thing that goes with this ubiquity is that you basically will eliminate the need for all the alternative channels as well, because you don't have to juggle all those OTTs and social networks, and then some right now smaller part of RCS coverage. You will only need the Android and iPhone, which save a ton of budget and just make it a lot easier to have the RCS based channel of communication with customers.
And just to come back to your earlier point about WhatsApp, WhatsApp's not where it should be either. You know, admittedly, RCS was ahead of WhatsApp probably around 2016, 17, 18, but then obviously WhatsApp business wasn't launched until 2018. And now it's probably 3-4 years ahead of RCS, I would say. But there are issues with WhatsApp. You know, when we do our research, we talk to a lot of aggregators and WhatsApp partners who are obviously trying to sell the business platform by the API to the large and medium enterprises, and the conversion rate of the inquiries is low single-digit percentage because of all the complexities, the other costs that obviously aren't out there, and the fact that as a brand, you're starting with a database of zero. So you've got to go out and build that, even though, you know, there's a bit of a miscommunication here when a lot of companies say, well, you can connect to 2.7 or 2.8 billion WhatsApp users. You can't. You've got to get them to sign up and opt in.
Right.
So again, you know, you've got all these different issues. So, you know, whereas RCS certainly isn't anywhere near where it should be, nor's WhatsApp. So again, that just kind of shows where we are in the evolution.
I think RCS would love to have those issues, by the way. So being forced, it's a more mature step in where it is. When I'm asked about RCS, and I was asked this last week in London, where RCS basically is at the moment, I always go back, I'm a marketing guy, so I always go back to the early adopter model. So there's always a stage where you have the early adopters, and there's a gap, and then you have this hockey stick of implementation and acceptance. So when I look at it, I say, well, we had the early adopter stage like 3 or 4 years ago when all of these amazing use cases came out. There was the Subway sandwiches use case, and there was the Virgin Trains use case. We all know these. There was Walgreens in the United States use case. There was all these great use cases. Well, it all went up on all of the websites. The GSMA had their RCS use cases that we showed it. I must have shown them 100 times to potential clients.
Yeah. And I think it's very important to kind of know if the operators are really on board with RCS. Do they have their own RCS agent, and do they use it to communicate with their retail base?
Okay, good point.
This is the acid test.
So we were at that stage 3-4 years ago, and then radio silence. Part of what happened in the middle is that the Google announcement came up in the middle, and basically that threw everything into a hizzy.
Pandemic didn't help either.
The pandemic didn't help, right? Well, we couldn't we couldn't move it forward by coming to conventions or events to talk about it. So that's
The pandemic did help WhatsApp.
That's true. That really helped them, and it helped the SMS a lot too. So we sort of had this radio silence, and now we need to go back to that early adopter stage again because
We haven't left it.
What?
We haven't left it.
We're nowhere near going up this hockey stick, right? We're nowhere near it. The only positive signs that I see is that there's one marketing agency in the world that's marketing RCS campaigns and having some level of success. I was in London last week. I met the guy from Unilever who's using RCS across a lot of different. He's got 47 countries. Unilever marketing brand. He used them across multiple. They have millions. They have a lot of brands. And the point that he made, and it was a point that struck me, that part of the problem that we're having as service providers selling this is that we're not the right people to sell this. We have no understanding of that market. And the point that he showed, and he put up a slide, I actually have it on my phone because I copied the slide. He was talking about what the marketings will look like. They're looking at, yes, they want to get traffic, but they also want to get engagement because engagement leads to conversion. It's the old marketing and sales funnel. He says, well, we're looking at engagement, we're looking at how much time people spend looking at the screen. They have, these sensors that can tell if you're moving your eyes or not. So a television screen, they get a certain amount when they add on, and a web banner was 2.7 seconds, and a text message was so many seconds. RCS was getting 26 seconds. It was blowing out all the other potential channels by 10 times. A lot more attention is being given to it. Now, the point that I took away from that is, yes, I'm a marketing guy, but I'm an OG marketing guy. I never sold how many seconds were eyes on a screen. And none of us in this industry, nobody in this room, nobody in this building, nobody in this industry around the world, except for one group of people, knows how to do that. And is that the problem? Do we all need to turn it to, as I said yesterday, do we all need to learn to market to marketers? Is that the issue? Is the issue that we need to train our people? Do we have to hire agencies to sell it for us? Is that what the GSMA should have done?
We've only been promoting messaging based on scale. That's it. You know, in terms of RCS, it's all about scale. WhatsApp, it's all about scale. It's not really about, you know, the functionality is great, but are we there yet? No, but then, like you say, what this agency is doing with Unilever and other clients is mind blowing. You know, it shows that the promise, the nirvana of what we've been talking about is happening if you can sell it in the right way to the right people, and they're doing that. So it's possible. And the other thing I think it's worth noting is that the ARPU on messaging is about $4. Annualized ARPU is $4. On mobile advertising, and this is just based on smartphone users, it's about $50. You know, that's an industry worth $250 billion fundamentally targeting smartphone users. So there's no difference really in terms of who's the targeted user there for rich messaging. It's smartphone users. So again, one industry over a similar period to kind of SMS has been able to turn it into a $250 billion industry. You know, we're at about $35 billion in terms of.
I think the number that came out just last week is that younger generation, Gen Z, Gen X, I don't know, whatever you call those gens, okay, 70% of their purchases are online. 70% are on a phone. Sorry, not online. Phone. Right? 70%. You know, we're OGs. We're blessed. You know, we have to look at big screens. Young people don't. They right away.
Yeah.
Gen Z, go ahead.
Am I? I don't know.
That was a real Gen Z question.
This is how you want to define me? Yeah.
Mike, I forgot. Sorry.
Yeah. So the thing is, yeah, the world is changing, and it's very nice to have a $250 billion market to tap into. I mean, obviously, it requires hard work. It requires learning new things, and we're supposed to reinvent ourselves every 5 to 7 years, learning new skills, learning new markets, just be better at what we do, or learn something new entirely. And this is the nature of the business. It's very nice for the companies that can actually pull it off. Too bad for those that can't. Well, there you go. It's just another iteration of who's the fittest.
This has been a nice conversation among friends. I noticed there are other people in the room. Any of you want to join our circle of friends or ask a question or make a comment about some of the stuff that we're talking about? Back with a hand raised. Wait for the mic. You're going to be recorded, and then we're going to use it against you.
Can you hear me? Right. Now, what I'm confused about is the Japanese situation, because the continual, every time we have these conversations and the GSMA talk about it, the gold standard, they had it. All the operators have it enabled in their networks, but as you just said, it's sort of died a death. They're not using it. Is that down to the Apple Android thing, or is it what? Because they can use it within their market. The market's big enough for them to utilize it, and the operators to gain options and revenue within that situation. So I just don't understand why that hasn't worked.
Okay, who wants to answer it?
I could do it. Yeah, I think.
It's a great question, by the way.
So the thing is, whenever you would sit down with an unspecified Japanese operator, they will be saying, look, you have to bring volumes. If you would like to pull this RCS, we're open to the cooperation. We can do it. We can create whatever you want. But if you could bring us like a couple of millions, 3 millions of messages every month, then there's business case. And essentially with the volumes that RCS industry is dealing with now, it's very, very hard to find the volume of RCS that is going that much on a particular network. So this is one thing, this is a serious business discussion.
Why is that important to them?
Well, I mean, yeah,
No, why is it important? Why can't they just take the message? What do they have to do? What does the network need to do if you're sending RCS messages on it? They
Well,
need to make sure that the systems are,
yeah,
they-
the quality is there, that they need to align a lot of systems.
it's
They
a
basically,
QA, it's a QA issue.
yeah, that they must do work and they must invest some resources in that. And that makes a lot of sense. It's just that in Europe, in some other markets, some operators are actually willing to invest in those cases, even that if that means like 1,000 messages at first in a month on their networks, because they would like to think that it's going to be 2,000 then next month and then 10,000, et cetera, and then it would reach the SMS proportion. Well, this was my experience.
I think just to put a bit more clarity on it. So in terms of RCS, it's doing okay, but it's got about 34, 35 million users in Japan. And also, you've also got the app. So you can use RCS on iPhone. That obviously WIT created when they obviously did part of the deal. So you've got a good percentage of users potentially who are using RCS. The issue is it hasn't translated into RBM. So I think the carriers used it for their internal promotions, which is what a lot of carriers are doing, where it's starting to take off in a few markets. And I think the government use it to send some of their communications, but that's kind of where it stops. What's happening, I think part of the issue here is that SMS is actually taking off and flying in Japan. And, kind of in terms of traffic, you're seeing kind of 50% year-on-year growth. And you're not seeing that in any other market, apart from when there's AIT, but that's a different conversation. But in terms of pure organic growth, Japan is kind of leading the way there. So, and I think also you've got Line, although there are issues with Line as well. But why, I'd have to look at my notes. I've got a lot of notes on Japan, but I can't remember them. But there are other reasons as to why it's kind of hasn't really kind of exploded into life.
Anyone else? I'll maybe just add a little bit about Japan and the unique marketplace there. They use a lot of different types of advertising channels that are not necessarily used in the West and that are very popular. And I worked a long time ago with marketing people in Japan on a global project. And, we didn't want to spend any money on billboards, let me just say. But for them, street signage and billboards are their most effective means of advertising. And when it came to using RCS as an advertising means, there was just no one who wanted to buy into it. And which goes back to Igor's answer about volumes. It was just no brand felt that it was going to be an effective way for them to advertise because people were not used to getting advertising in that way. And it was just part of something internally Japanese. They just felt it wasn't going to be an effective mode of advertising. I'm not sure how that's going to work today because I think over the time that may have changed a little bit, but it's how people are used to getting advertising, which one of the reasons why it didn't work. And yes, the networks could have been ready to do it, but there was no need. There was no demand for it. I think
I think the model is first of all, they would make sure that the P2P is working, and that's exactly what they rolled out in 2018. And the P2P was initially covering all the operators, both Apple and Android devices. On paper, it was a wonderful case, a very, so to speak, fat land for the A2P to step in after some time when everything is in P2P is perfect. Yeah.
But also, I think back then it's a race to gold. Because, if you think about it, you have the GSMA doing the RCS labs all around the world. And, it was all building it up. Who's going to be the first to offer the gold standard? And what, and you then had the package coming from Synchronos and I think Synchronos and WIT, wasn't it? So where basically it's one platform for all three carriers. And that looked like a really kind of logical way to then roll RCS and RBM into other markets, which is obviously what their plan was to do. You know, I guess looking at the US with CCCIM, very similar model, didn't work.
The operators all agreed. They were all going to collaborate in RCS. Well, that was 3 years ago. I think it was right before COVID hit. And then nothing happened. Actually, now there's going to be RCS launch in September by that same advertising agency that marketing agency that we spoke about before. They're actually doing a launch, I think, together with Verizon in September, October in the United States. Any other questions? So this has been a great talk, but before we go, I'm going to give you a chance to give a closing statement, but your closing statement has to answer the following question. If your moderator was a rock,
Madam Animal, would RCS be?
go ahead, closing statement.
I would compare an RCS not to a sloth, but to a sleeping rhino. You know, the thing about the rhinos is that they have a very poor eyesight and they don't hear very well. But with their size and just being invincible, basically, they don't have to care. And it's the same thing with RCS. There's so much potential, there's so much might, there's so much power, but when it actually gets up and gets up to speed, there would be no way of stopping it.
You're going to like this. I can do the rock. So for me, it's kryptonite. Because obviously, you know, everyone agrees that RCS could be, and at some point will be, a very, very powerful channel, and it will be. But right now it's surrounded by kryptonite, which is destabilizing and limiting its powers. So yeah, when it frees itself from kryptonite, it will become a super channel.
And my closing statement is thank you everybody for attending. I hope that we've answered some of your questions or thoughts about RCS. And if you don't, you know how to contact each of us. So thank you again and have a great rest of your day.